Welcome to Home Again. This podcast explores what changes inside you when you move to another country. And today I'm joined by Shelby, who moved from one country to another during a time of pregnancy and major life transition. And Shelby, thank you so much for being here today. And before we begin, I just want to let you know that there's no pressure to have perfect answers. This is simply a space to reflect your experience and to tell your story in your own words. So let's start at the very beginning. To help people just get a sense of who you are, could you introduce yourself and just give us an indication of where you've come from, where you've ended up?
Sure. No, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about everything today. As you said, my name is Shelby. I was born and raised in the state of Michigan in the United States. I'm a U.S. citizen. I moved later on after I turned about 30 to Arizona, lived there for a couple years. Worked remotely. I've worked remotely since 2018. I work in IT. I'm a non-technical IT person, so I tell everybody I have the best job because I work with a ton of smart people, but I don't have to be as smart as them. I have a passion for combat sports. Growing up, my dad was a competitive boxer for 12 years, and he created my passion for combat sports. So I was a lifelong athlete. And when I moved to Arizona, I pursued Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu more and began training MMA. So I spent quite a few years there, and I've trained for pretty much my whole adult life. So it's become a pretty big part of my identity. And I have my brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and trained on a fight team in Arizona for a year, but injuries and COVID prevented me from actually ever fighting. And then I ended up having a major neck surgery from training MMA, and that was all over in the past. I also finished an Ironman triathlon in 2012. So when I was in college, I was a triathlete for quite a few years. And after my venture in Arizona, I moved to Texas for work for a year. And then I ended up in Florida. And it was in Florida where I was training boxing. That's why it's relevant to the story.
Yes.
And I met my now husband, who is Chilean. He was teaching boxing classes at the gym that I was training at, and he was working on a visa, an H-1B1, as an aircraft mechanic. And we started dating. I had actually just gone through a divorce before that, so it was a big time of change in my life. And we moved in together, found out I was pregnant, and I said, hey, let's move to Chile because he has a huge family support here. We don't have it in the US. And I've been here for about a year and 2 or 3 months.
Thank you for sharing that. So quite a bit of experience moving around the US, and then it sounds like the US just prepared you for a bigger move abroad to Chile. And that's the part that I'd like us to focus in on, because it's going to be interesting to see how all of that experience of the training for sports, how your various life experience came together in allowing you to start adapting to life in Chile. You also mentioned that your husband was part of the reason for the move, clearly there, and then the little one that has since arrived, since you've moved as well. But what I'd like to do is just ask one question. All of that move was happening. You thought about it clearly and then decided Chile is it. What did you imagine life would feel like once you arrived in Chile?
He had visited Chile previously, and I met his family, and we visited the south of Chile, which we don't live in the south of Chile. We live in the mid region, the fifth region is what they call it. So the south of Chile is very different from this region that we're in. It's I don't know if you know anything about the landscape of Chile, but there's a lot of forest, there's a lot of lakes, there's a lot of mountains. The climate is a bit colder. It is the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I have a lot of places left to go, but I had this feeling when I visited the south of Chile that was so like enchanting and fulfilling. And it was just so different. The culture, too, the people from where I had lived in the US, that I just had nothing but good feelings about Chile. So I knew that when I moved, I would be feeling a lot of excitement and discovery. And I love change. I'm a person who loves change. So I figured that would be what I felt when I got here. And it was. It was I think also there's like a honeymoon phase with things too. And
Yes.
sometimes I get caught up in the
Yes.
perpetual chase of the honeymoon phase. Not to say it's not still great because it is, but there was definite excitement when I got
Yeah.
here.
And so there was that excitement, there was that idea of what life would look like. You had that picture of a specific cultural context and things. Was there any point when reality began to feel different from what you expected?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think one of the earliest wake up calls or reality checks for me was when I was in the hospital having my son. So I gave birth to my son in May of 2025. He was born on May 23rd. And again, I'm from the US, so I'm not used to socialized healthcare. We have private clinics we pay a lot of money for. And I went to the hospital, and it was a public health hospital, not knowing what to expect. So I didn't pack the things that I should. I mean, down to like silverware and plates and water. So I'm in the
Indeed.
hospital thinking that, I had an emergency C-section. So it's like I needed a lot of supplies, and naive me being from the US, a hospital's almost like a hotel. Sometimes
That's
you can
right. It's
order
all
food
there.
and you can, have blankets and pillows. I had to have my in-laws bring me everything. I felt so bad, but that was my first big reality check, like, "Wow, this is really different. I need to really do my research from now on."
Yes. And how long had you been in the Chile at that point?
I was only here for 3 months.
So that was fairly early on. You already had the reality of what things would be like.
Yes. Yep.
And that is actually helpful for us to think through because in all of these moves, there are always hidden realities that begin to crop up. And often it's further along than that, but sometimes it is almost instantly that you get hit with, oh wow, this is it. And if you were to look back in that whole process, was there anything that you suddenly felt yourself grieving from what you had left behind compared to where you were at that point that you didn't expect to grieve?
Yes, I think it was the efficiency of the United States in general. Of course, it depends on where you live, which state that can influence it too. But I mean, in the US, there's, a lot of software processes that make everything so easy. Everything is kind of formalized. You get like a confirmation for appointments, and there's never like handwriting down records. Like I noticed a lot of the people in the hospital were handwriting medical records. And it's just you have to be very organized with your own
Yeah,
things.
right.
You have to have a paper trail yourself, like a physical, literal paper trail. And I'm not used to that, being in the US. Oh, everything is fine. We'll get a reminder, we'll get a confirmation. And that's been very, very different here for sure.
It's definitely one of those changes that you realize the day-to-day aspects that you think are the same everywhere, when that kicks in and is so different. For my move through to Germany, it was the same. There were some things that you naturally think would carry over because of moving from an African country through to a European country, and then suddenly it's drastically different. And I think that's part of moving to every country is for people just to realize as you move, a lot of the day-to-day processes that just make logical sense may not make that logical sense or work in the new country that you're in. And that is definitely a very real hidden aspect of these moves. In the notes that you gave through, you mentioned that one of those aspects that was quite difficult in the move was leaving your father at that point. What did that feel like for you day to day? Because this is one of those hidden things as well, leaving the closest people to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, guilt. Guilt is the word that comes to my mind. My family's very small. My parents were divorced when I was young, and my dad pretty much raised me. He did end up getting remarried a little bit afterward, but I've always had my dad, and he's my person. And his health has not been great the past few years. Gosh, I've never been more than a year without seeing my dad physically in person, and he hasn't met my son. Yeah, it's been so hard. So it's gonna be in July. It'll be 2 years since I've seen my dad, and he's supposed to come visit in December, but he's had, like I said, a lot of health issues, and I haven't wanted to put my baby on a plane because,
Yeah.
um, and it's just like, it's so much guilt, although he's my father and, he has his own life and I'm an adult and I'm a mom now. We had some serious health scares. One time, my brother and my stepmom called me and they said, "Hey, you might want to get up here. Like, he might not make it." And I think I was 4 months, 5 months postpartum and
Yes.
it just ruined me.
Yeah. Oh,
That news.
incredibly difficult.
Yeah, yeah, so that's just guilt,
Mm.
I can't wait to see him, and he understands why I moved but it's definitely by far the hardest part.
Yes. And for many, that's where you suddenly get hit with the reality of what that distance looks like. It's when you can't suddenly just get on a hour-long flight and you're there, that it takes a lot more logistical planning. And you hear stories of people saying, oh, they travel home to see parents and loved ones, or there is this idea in your head that you'll just be able to go every few months. But the reality is when life kicks in, that isn't always there. And suddenly you do have all that emotion of it mixed up. And so it's helpful for people to be aware of as they transition that this will be one aspect that will impact you and that you will feel. Another hidden aspect in this is that you've got all of this longing for aspects that have changed that made life easy back home, and that's different. You're missing people that are gone, but then there's this hidden aspect of suddenly you realize you feel like a bit of an outsider. And when did you first begin to feel that weight of being other in your new country?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, all the time. So, I think when I first moved here, when I came here, I spoke 0 Spanish. 0, understood 0. And I had made attempts to learn, but I was pregnant, so it was very hard for me to retain anything in my brain, plus I was
Yeah,
working, I was busy, I was planning for an international move, tying up loose ends, selling everything as you do when you move countries, and, I didn't have a lot of time to study the language, and I speak English with my husband. We always spoke English. So when I first got here and I would sit down to like a family meal, I felt it because everybody would be speaking Spanish, obviously. In my husband's family, I'm so fortunate. His sister speaks English fluently, and his brother does too. So he has 2 siblings. All of the siblings speak English fluently. So that was
yeah.
really really nice.
That definitely is, makes a big difference.
Yeah, and it's not super common here, but they went to good schools, they have good education, so they speak English, but when it was other members of the family, you could feel like the it was never no one was ever rude or not inclusive, but it's awkward, because
Yeah.
you're sitting there and I'm a very talkative, outgoing person, but here I haven't been able to speak freely and clearly with people yet. So I can't really like convey my personality or the fact that I like to joke a lot, because I feel like sarcasm comes way later in the game with learning a different language. And it was uncomfortable for me too, because I didn't know, like, should I act like I'm listening? Should I look at people? Should I just leave the room
Yeah.
because I feel so insignificant? But now it's fine. I mean, I have learned the Spanish that I know, which is it's not much. I mean, Chilean Spanish is a super hard dialect of Spanish too, and they say it's, like, the hardest there is. I'm to a good point where I can, participate in family conversations, and I'm catching about 40% of what the family's saying now, 30 to
Good job.
40
Well
depending on
done.
the person. So, it's now I try to assimilate myself, but in the beginning,
Yes.
it was so awkward. Awkward is just the phrase I would use, and, I felt like a burden. Yeah.
And this is one of those areas that will impact people moving, particularly to a country where it is a language foreign to their mother tongue, because so much of your identity is wrapped up in that. You suddenly can't express your humor. You can't just say your basic catch lines that make you you. It doesn't translate. You don't have the words. And so you suddenly feel very outside just because you feel like you've lost part of you. That does gradually return. It looks different as you learn the language, and that's likely what you speak about when you're saying, well, now you just feel you can gradually interact again, and that's coming. But it is definitely one of those hidden aspects that language is a big part of our day to day reality in a new context. It's very
Huge.
difficult at first.
Huge. Honestly, I didn't realize the ramifications of that until I moved. I mean, I still am another thing for me is loss of independence.
Yes.
So I need my husband to do a lot of things. And it's very frustrating for me because I lived as such an independent person for so many years. And when he was in the US, I helped him with a lot of things.
Yes.
So I like that role. I don't like being the dependent.
But again, that's a very helpful aspect that you point to. What moving countries does, particularly when it's a country that you don't speak the local language, is it teaches you humility very
Yes.
quickly. And it teaches you very quickly that you need to rely on others because there are times that you just need somebody there to interpret things for you, or else you could end up in hopeless situations. And so
Mhm.
that might, for a lot of people, become a positive as well. Because I think for many of us, we do grow up in context where we're taught to be very independent. It's very much about how we can push ourselves forward, and there's very little reliance on the community structures. But a lot of countries that you move to, suddenly that language barrier creates a new dynamic to your own personality where you now learn, hang on, I can rely on others. And there are people that want to support me. Uh, and that can be helpful too. Was there ever a moment as all of these hidden realities began to creep up that you began to question your decision to move?
Oh, absolutely. I think it took a while for me to have that moment. It was probably like almost 10, 11 months in. So we're renting houses because I don't have my residency here. I'm in the process of it as a whole different piece.
Yes.
So, although I work remotely in the US, and I probably will because it's a better situation, my husband is changing careers. So, he doesn't have like the borrowing power from banks and everything yet. And I don't even have a bank account here because I don't have what they call a root number, which is my basically social security number for people in the US.
Right.
Um, so, yeah, I have a hard time we have a hard time renting houses because, we have to present contracts, like, "Where do you get your money?" And we have to say, "Well, we make money from the US," because my husband works for a US-based company as well, remotely,
Yes.
so people are very suspicious, and the landlord culture in Chile is very different from the US.
Okay.
They will always usually I shouldn't say always. They usually try to keep your security deposit. I feel like you don't have as many renters' rights as you do in the US. Again, this goes into the processes and things.
Yes.
Yeah. So the biggest challenge was when our lease so we prepaid for a year in the house we were living in when we first moved because that's the only way anybody would accept us. So we were trying to move houses and we were encountering all of these problems with, questions and inquisitions. And I understand, because realtors, they're working and they're trying to understand like how are these people getting money? Like we had people thinking that we were like laundering money at one point, and I said to my husband, and I never say this. I said, "Let's just go back to the US."
Yeah.
At the time, I owned a house there, which I recently sold because I was renting it, but it became too much of a hassle. So I still had a house, and I said, "Let's just go back. Let's just
Yes.
take the baby, take our 2 dogs," which we flew down with, "and let's just go back to the US." And we really thought about it for a while, but I was upset that I even had that thought because it was like throwing in the towel to me.
Yes. And that's part of the process as all of those hidden realities kick in. There is often a point that you begin to question it. And I think for people just to realize that that is normal, being able to assess and look at where you are and say, hang on, why am I doing this? What am I struggling like this for? Thing is not to stay in that, because there is a major internal shift that happens. And that's what I want us just to shift to as we look at that identity and internal shift. Because as I was reading through your notes that you'd made, you were saying that part of this process revealed to you what became your biggest challenge, but also your biggest growth opportunity. And I thought that was helpful. And maybe you want to spend some time just speaking about that, because we often stop at all of those hidden things and think, well, this is so bad, let's go back. But the truth is, it becomes a growth opportunity as well. So do you want to share a bit about that, both the challenge and the growth that came from it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the growth has been amazing. And I would have never done the things I'm doing if I had stayed in the US. And to generalize about US citizens, people who live in the United States, sometimes we get comfortable in our country and we say, oh, this is the land of opportunity and we have everything. But do we? The things that I wanted, the reasons I wanted to move to Chile were obviously family support for my child and safety.
Yes.
I never wanted to send my child to school and worry about an active shooter coming in. And, it's a problem in the US and it's scary. And I had an incident too during my divorce where I was chased by my ex-husband with a firearm and I had to get a restraining order. And it was a crazy, crazy event that opened up my eyes and made me realize like there needs to be more laws in the US about gun safety. And both my
Yes.
parents are former law enforcement. So it's, I've seen both ends of the spectrum, but it was a wake up
That's right.
call as a parent. I need to, protect my child as much as possible. So the other reason that I wanted to move to Chile, one of the huge benefits is the healthcare.
Yes.
When I was moving from the US and I was 6 months pregnant, my contract ended. And it was one of the worst times, worst
Yeah.
economies in tech history at that moment. I mean, I had gone from multiple job offers to nothing. I mean, you couldn't even
Yes.
get a recruiter to call you back for months. The cost of living aspect was a benefit for me. Chile is not super cheap, though. You have to be careful
Yes.
because there's some areas here that are beautiful. You couldn't imagine how beautiful they are.
Yeah.
But the cost of living in general, like the rent, is quite a bit cheaper. So
Yes.
I knew if I worked and saved money and we had a cushion that I could come here and have a better life for my son. I could afford a private school. I could afford his health care. And then I could give him his culture because when we were naming our son, my husband's name is Ignacio, by the way. He said, well, what do you want to name him? And I said, I want to name him a Chilean name. Because at the
Okay.
time we were living in the United States, and I said, it's very important for him to carry his culture that he may not
Yes.
know in the US. We named him Fernando.
Yes.
And now that we're in Chile, though, it's great because he has that name, but he's going to have an aspect of my culture because he's going to speak English fluently, by the time he's
That's
going to
right.
school. So the growth for me has been tremendous. Moving to Chile, it's amazing to see how the family culture and the friend culture is different here as well. In the US, it's very like everyone for themselves, every man for themselves, because when you're the family unit in the US, you move out when you're 18. Like that's pretty normal. Unless your parents have money,
Right.
because it's expensive. And I didn't have that, like
Yes.
I live very far from everything. I was in a very rural area too. So you're not always just in a city where you can go to college and live with parents in the US.
Yes.
And here is like I found people are much more helpful when it comes to like the family will take you in, they'll provide for you. It's normal for kids. I see a lot more kids living here till they're in their 20s, sometimes late
Okay.
20s while they're going to
That's
school,
good to know.
launching their career. Yeah, so it helped me obviously grow as a person, as a mother to be for my son.
Yes.
And of course, the language aspect, because I can't run around and be that person that doesn't learn Spanish the whole time I'm here. And my main motivation is I would have never learned Spanish in the US. There's absolutely no way. I mean, there's people who speak Spanish in the US, but it's regional, usually, down by like where I used to live, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas.
Yes.
But it's not something I would have ever, I've always wanted to learn a different language, but I'm lazy when it comes to learning. I really am. So I knew that I needed the immersion training, but I also, my motivation now to learn the language is not because I want to learn the language. It's
Yeah.
when I have parent teacher conferences for my son, I want to be able to talk to the teacher when I go to the doctor's appointments. I want to be able to fill them in on, how he's doing and get their feedback.
Yes.
Language is power. Like if you don't have the language of the country, you're not going to be able to be independent and you're going to be very handicapped for many
That's right.
things. Yeah.
Indeed. And that whole process of the growth, particularly as you learn a language, is nothing better than that feeling of getting to a parent teachers meeting or doctor's meeting, and suddenly you realize, I understand what you're saying, and I can give you the basics of what's happening here. Shelby, what part of you had to change in order to adapt to the new reality of life in Chile?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I would say um I needed to learn how to ask for help, like you said earlier. I've always been hyper independent, and like in the US I can go years without asking for anything from family or friends, but here it's every day. I mean, I have to be humble enough, and you mentioned humility earlier. I think that's the best word you can use to describe moving to a different country is it's a super, super humbling experience. So I have been humbled, which I always am by many things I choose to do in life, but this has been the most humbling and I've had to ask for help all the time,
That's right.
every single day. Yep.
And you mentioned that you were going through pregnancy and birth all at the same time as this transition was happening, which is a major life transition in its own, never mind the transition of a move. How did that experience change how you see life, how you see people, or your beliefs in general?
Oh my gosh. I would not recommend it. Maybe take one huge life change at a time. I combined a lot of them. So I think that coming here while pregnant was great for me because I saw a lot of people act as a community, even strangers in public. Like I'm obviously pregnant, I'm at a place and somebody would get up and they would let me sit down, or I would be reaching for something at the grocery store and my husband's like, pushing the cart or talking to somebody because he's translating for me and somebody would grab something for me. So there was a lot of sense of community here. And I think that they really, really take care of pregnant women. They love it. They love babies here. My son, every time we take him out, everybody's always, talking to him and oh, he's so beautiful. Children are a huge part of the culture here.
Yes.
So I think that honestly coming here helped shape my opinions of people in general as a whole for the better.
Yes.
And like I said, the family culture is a lot different here than the US. And for the first time, I felt like when I was in the US, I always felt like I don't want to have a baby. It's going to be a burden, right? Like the baby's in a public place and he screams or whatever. But, people may look at you or you're in a coffee shop and, you're kind of like, it's an inconvenience
Yes.
because people expect sometimes to live in a child-free world, which if they don't have children is okay, but here in South America and Chile, it's very different. I mean, people have their kids everywhere. They have them out late at night. They're always with them. I mean, if you go anywhere, they're bringing their baby, and it's part of their culture. And you go to
That's
a
right.
restaurant and you see things for babies to play, and you see a ton of playgrounds at shopping centers, and it was really, really good for me to move here when I was
Yes.
pregnant and after I had the baby because a lot of people love babies here. They're very, very adored and accepted. So, yeah, I
So
think
that
that was the
actually
best.
helped you in the whole transition. while it was a difficult time of your life to do
Yes.
that, it was actually a
Yes.
good time as well, just because it gave you an inroad into the community, which
Yes.
is sort of that silver lining. And where we spoke earlier about often we get caught up in the negatives or the "Oh, I should just go back," and that's where we stay. But to be able to see even those difficult situations, a difficult transition, being pregnant, all of that, there is a silver lining to it. So
Totally.
that's a big part of it. Let's
Yep.
speak a bit about relationship and belonging. You mentioned that many of your relationships shifted during the move. How did relocation affect your closest relationships?
Yeah. One was made stronger, ironically, but the others were pretty much weakened because there were several things like the time zones a little different depending on where you're at in the US. So it's not always convenient to talk.
Yes.
As I said with my dad, we definitely talk less now, which was something I had to get used to because we were talking all the time. And now we make things a normal, like video calls, which we hadn't done in the past. It's funny too, how if you take away one method of communication from people, like for instance, the actual telephone, because I live abroad, I can't accept phone calls. I mean, I can, but they're 25 cents a minute. So now we must communicate through a different medium. But for some people, the change of communicating through a different medium, like a voice over IP, like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, is just people can't handle it. And it's
Yeah,
so
for one
weird to
thing
see
too
that.
many.
They can't. They're like, I'm not. And my dad is one of those. It's
Mm.
not because I think it's because he's older and he's used to his way, but
Yes.
it's just funny to me. So but on the other hand, one of my best friends that I grew up with, I've reconnected with her and we're staying in touch over Facebook Messenger. And, we always have these
Word.
great conversations and video calls. And she's been a huge support for me. I mean, we were best friends since I was like 4 years old. We grew up our
Okay.
whole lives together. And we found each other again because we were both having these times of difficulty. She was having difficulty with family issues, and I was having difficulty with all of this change. And we
Yeah.
kind of like the string theory, we kind of just met each other again at a different point in our lives. So it's been good and bad depending
Yes.
on the person. Yeah.
That's right. And so part of that is there needs to be a deliberate change in how you communicate. That's what came across because it's natural because phone calls become astronomical across the distance. But
Yes.
that means that that interaction becomes more deliberate and it's deliberate from both sides. And I think that's what's helpful for people to understand is that some relationships will slide away and it's not necessarily because of anything that you do. It's just that other people aren't necessarily willing to commit to the changes or the deliberate actions that are needed for that. So something as small as switching from a phone call to using Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp. Suddenly that is too difficult. But there will be some relationships that improve because people will say, hang on, you mean enough that I will spend that time. I will make sure that I commit to it. And so
Yep.
relationships will look different, but those that matter will grow stronger. And I think that's what it sounds like from you, your best friend that you grew up with, and that actually strengthened.
Yep.
Was there a moment that you began to feel a stronger sense of belonging as you lived in Chile? Initially, you said that there's this outsider. When did that moment
Mhm.
of belonging come for you?
Mm. No, if it has happened yet.
Okay.
Parts have happened, like, when I was
Yes.
saying being at, like, the table and being able to ask some questions or, have a little bit of conversation with people who speak Spanish, that's part of the belonging, but until I'm more fluent and confident because it's the scariest thing, like, speaking somebody's language in front of them, I only do it in front of my in-laws, my
Yes.
father-in-law and my mother-in-law because I'm with them all the time and they only speak Spanish. And um, it's so funny, even my husband the other day, he's like, "You were communicating with my parents? How did you say it in Spanish?" And I had to like rehearse the whole thing in Spanish or recap the whole thing in Spanish
Yes.
because he doesn't even know what Spanish I know because he's always speaking to me in English. He's like, "Wow, you're learning." But I'm still to this day like terrified. I'll order at restaurants and stuff, but I'm just it's this stage fright thing, and the response when it happens and Chileans speak so fast and there's so much slang and then I freeze. So I
Yes.
think that, there are parts of me feeling like I can belong, and that's having conversations with, like, my in-laws and understanding some things when we go to our doctor's appointments and what his friends are talking about when they come over. Of course, my husband will translate, but I'll say, "I understand, I understand, I understand," so that's good. But I think that until I'm, like, fluent with the language or just capable of going out and being independent, I don't think that I will have, like, that sense of truly belonging until
Yes.
then.
And the truth of the matter is that there is no set time frame. And for some people, they may suddenly find that belonging within a, a month or two. Others, it may take 2 or 3 years, but the process is to be gentle with yourself and allow yourself to see the small progress that is happening. And there will be a stage where suddenly you may even just slide into it and you may not even realize, hang on, I belong. And it will be, as you reflect back, you'll think, this has been a while. I don't actually know that definite date. And it will look different for each person. And that's a part of the encouragement for you, for me, as I transition to new contexts, as listeners transition, is just to realize that belonging comes at independent paces for each person. That's unique, and that's all right. Not to think that you're falling behind, or this isn't working for you because you don't feel that sense of belonging just yet. If you look at your life now, obviously there's a lot of change since you've arrived. You've become a mother. You've adapted to a new language. Who are you now that you were not before this move?
Oh gosh, I'm a completely different person. I mean, not only motherhood completely changes you, or being a parent completely changes you, but yeah, I mean, everything I do, it's like a rebirth for yourself when you move to a different country. It's like you have to start with the very basics, and then you have to figure out how to even approach the basics, and then you have to implement those things. So for me, it's a whole rebirth from just existing in this country, having my baby, and then figuring out I need to assimilate to this country's processes and culture. Um, and I think that sometimes other people from the US, they think that those people need to assimilate to them, because English is so widely spoken and it's such a quote unquote powerful language, they say. Like
Yes.
sometimes I think there's a bit of an arrogance. And I don't think I was like this when I moved here. I think it was more maybe being naive because I have a lot of friends in the US. Obviously my husband is an immigrant and I always was around immigrants like everywhere I went because there's so many and the sports I participated in, there was a lot of people from different countries, MMA, jujitsu, a lot of people from all over the world came to train. So I would see their struggles and I would empathize with their struggles. But when I got here, I didn't know all of the struggles from like, I can't open a bank account, So it's like I have to do the steps in order. And immigration takes a long time. I mean, I applied, I think it was a couple months ago, and I think it's 180 days on my visa until I get approved. I'm still on a tourist visa.
Yes.
And I have to wait that long. Maybe they'll get to my application, maybe they won't. Only then will I get the opportunity to have a root number and a bank account. So it's like it stripped away all of my opportunities that I had in the US because I mean I was a homeowner. I had worked in, my career for 13 years. I participated in extracurriculars. I, you know, moved a lot. It was fine, but here I'm like stripped down to like, okay, you are a very, very rudimentary beginner and you must obey the process all the way through.
Yes. That's right. And it teaches you patience because you are suddenly at the bureaucratic snail pace movement and you can't do anything to change that. And so you just need to be able to find the way to be patient in the middle of all of the government structures and whatever methods there are.
Yep.
Shelby, what has relocation taught you about yourself?
Oh, to never give up. I never give up. I I and that goes back to sports for me is like I had that mindset as an athlete my whole life. When I was training for the Ironman and when I actually did the race, It's the longest triathlon,
Yes.
um, and I ended up racing that day. I finished in 11 hours and 53 minutes. So that was the biggest test for me up until that point in my life is like, and this applies to everything I've done in life is when I was completing that race, if you let a negative thought enter your mind,
Mm.
your body's going to react negatively. So there's a huge thing like when your heart rate gets too high and you're racing, it's this thing called like biofeedback. Like you have to like control your breathing, get your heart rate under control and, calm yourself down. Like I've had to use a lot of those principles of don't have this negative self-talk. Like you're in a really long process, like learning a different language. It's not gonna happen overnight. When you get into, extreme periods of adversity, like in fighting, like in jujitsu or MMA, I mean, I had a major neck surgery from that too. So I think doing hard things in my life and challenging myself outside of this has prepared me for this
Yes.
it's a different kind of strength when you
Yes,
move
it will
because
be.
it's very isolating. I think that you touched on the point of loneliness. Like I can't really make friends here because I don't speak the language and
Yes.
I work from home and I have a baby and I'm really here. I mean, I don't have a driver's license. I don't walk places cuz without my husband or family because obviously I can't really get around independently. So the feeling of loneliness has been the
Yes.
hardest thing to contend
Yeah.
with, which sports didn't really prepare me for. So that's been a
Yes.
new a new challenge, but yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
But I think that's the important thing. Don't give up. And that thing that
Yeah.
you were speaking about, that what's prepared you. So you, from a young age, you've already had that preparation in place. But don't give up. It's difficult, but if you keep going, things improve. Every little step makes it a little easier. Now, Shelby, part of my work as a life coach and with Bravely Me is to allow people to be able to tell their stories because stories have great power in being able to first bring personal healing, but also to encourage others who find themselves in similar situations. Now, big part of a story is that it has chapters and chapters have titles. So if you were to give this chapter of your life, this chapter of moving, a title, what would that title be and why?
I would say that this chapter would be titled Chaos is Growth. It may not seem like it at the time because I've had so many obstacles thrown my way since moving countries. I mean, every single obstacle you could think of, from housing to healthcare to things that I had left in the States that I needed to tie up to problems with my dogs to, everything. And at one point, it seemed like it was just everything was going wrong and nothing was moving forward in the right direction. But now that I reflect back on all of those things happening spontaneously, pretty much at the same time, I came out better and my family came out better and we came out the other side. Not only did we come out better, but we learned a lot from each of those experiences. Like, why did we get into this experience? And then how can we avoid it in the future? And it's made us smarter. So um, yeah, we've had the opportunity to do a lot of growth. Even my husband being a Chilean, he's experienced a lot of things here that he had not encountered or that were just some things that he had forgotten about since
Yes,
leaving Chile.
that's right.
So we're all better for it, honestly.
That's right. Chaos is growth. Good title for this phase of your life. If somebody is listening and they're at the beginning of a move like yours, what would you want them to understand? What encouragement would you want to leave them with?
I would say take the risk. Just do it. If you sit there, sometimes people will sit there and they will think about what they want to do with their lives and they'll have all these grand plans. And I did too. I always wanted to live abroad. It was one of my goals in life. I thought maybe Europe or something. um, and not while pregnant and, all of those things, but I still wanted to take the risk. But if I would have planned for it, and spent the years and oh, this and that, but here's the pros of here and here's the cons of leaving. I would have never done it. So I think that if you have that inclination or you have any ounce of like, life is so huge outside of where you currently live. I mean, even here in Chile, we may not stay here like yourself, you're moving different countries more than once. I mean, I think that's amazing, and I would love to do that for myself too because the world is huge. There's so many ways of life, and I understand why people do it, but, like, my friends back home and everything, they're in the same city or state or whatever because it's comfortable, and they
That's
have
right.
great lives there, but I'm just not that person. I need to take the risk, and I think if you even have that inkling of, "I want to do it," I think that regret is a worse feeling than taking a risk, and then you have challenges when you take the risks.
Well, Shelby, thank you so much for sharing your story so openly. I really appreciate the way that you've just reflected on both the challenges as well as all the changes that came with the move that you undertook. And if you're listening and something in this conversation has resonated with you, you are not alone in that. These experiences are often quieter than people expect, but they shape how we see ourselves, our relationships, and where we belong. And Home Again is part of Bravely Me, a practice supporting people through life's transitions, identity shifts, and relationship change. If you'd like to explore your own experience more deeply, you can find more at bravelyme.eu. And thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.